Okay, today we are having the clinical consultation network without Dr. Davis. He is on vacation this week, so I'll be filling in. And with that, let me pull up my PowerPoint presentation to get us kicked off. Oh, it didn't work. Here we go. All right, so today we have the Sumner County Youth Empowerment Program here, talking about addressing youth's mental health issues through compassion, treatment, and accountability. And we have Alan Hickey and Judge David Howard with us today, and we are excited to hear from them. Before we get started, I want to talk about what's coming up. We have employment with our favorite, Janet Schaus, is going to be here next week. After that, on October 18th, Culture City is going to be here talking about the partnership between Tennessee Highway Patrol, DID, and Culture City, talking about sensory training for all of the troopers across the state, and then having a sensory kit in the trunk of each vehicle. October 25th is our national episode, our NAD collaboration, and I'm not sure who the presenter is going to be for that yet, but we'll find out soon. And on November 1st, we'll have Mickey Tonos back with us. So we are excited about those guests. And then I have a little bio about each of our presenters today that I will quickly read for you guys. All right. So we have our two presenters. Alan Hickey is a graduate of Westmoreland High School in Sumner County, Tennessee. He received his bachelor's degree from Brigham Young University in political science and his JD from the J. Reuben Clark Law School. He is a public interest fellowship at the Sumner County Juvenile Court after graduating from law school and passing the Tennessee bar. Following the fellowship, he was hired as assistant court director for the Sumner County Juvenile Court, where he has helped implement the statutory changes from the Juvenile Justice Reform Act and transition the juvenile court to Quest, a new case management system. He has also assisted in the establishment of the Sumner County Youth Empowerment Program, Tennessee's first juvenile mental health court. Judge David Howard was born in Knoxville but spent most of his life in Middle Tennessee. He's a graduate of Gallatin High School, Middle Tennessee State University, and the Nashville School of Law. While in law school, he worked as a probation officer for Sumner County Juvenile Court. After graduation, and for over 12 years, he was in the practice with future Judge Mike Carter at the law office of Carter and Howard. In late 2001, David was appointed by Judge Barry Brown as Sumner County's first juvenile court magistrate, a position he held until he was appointed by Sumner County Commission to succeed the retiring Judge Brown. In 2018, he was elected to his current position. In 2022, he was reelected to an 8-year term. Judge Howard was a founding member of the Sumner County Teen Court, served on the Sumner County Courthouse Planning Committee, and is a chairperson for a court improvement program subcommittee to address the juvenile appellate system. Additionally, Judge Howard created Tennessee's first juvenile mental health court, the Sumner County Youth Empowerment Program, and recently became the newest member of the Tennessee Safe Babies Court. He is married to his wife, Christina, and they have a son named Andrew. And I know that all of them have been sick recently, so thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I do want you both to share a fun fact, something interesting about you before we get started. Alan, you go first.
One interesting thing about me, and this is always lots of jokes in the office about this, but I lived in Africa for 2 years. Um, I was in Sierra Leone and Liberia. I served as a missionary there for 2 years, and our joke in the office is I always begin my stories by saying, "When I was in Africa, dot dot dot," and we have a lot of fun with that. And Judge gives me a lot of grief for that as well. So
That's a pretty interesting fact. Judge, what do you have?
Well, besides the fact that I've known Alan since he was about 16, uh, and was well aware of his journeys in Africa, I suppose my fun fact is I have a fairly encyclopedic knowledge of hard rock and heavy metal.
I didn't see that coming.
Nobody does.
Well, I had the pleasure of serving on the advisory committee when these men put together the idea and advisory committee for this juvenile mental health court that eventually became known as it is today. And so I'm excited to have them here to share about this court program, what it does, and then how it can serve both mental health community and the dual diagnosis community. So if you guys want to take it away, I'm going to mute myself and I'll follow along the chat and let you know if anything pops up in there.
Okay. Alan, I'm gonna, as Babs has indicated, I've been sick recently, so I'm just now sort of getting my voice and everything back. I'm gonna allow Alan to do a lot of the talking today. I will pop in and say some things as we move along, but it may be easier for everybody to hear from him than hear from me. So,
Well, Judge, if you could just do one thing before I take over, if you could just talk a little bit about why um, you wanted to pursue creating a juvenile mental health court in Sumner County, and then I can go with kind of what the process has been um, from that point.
sure. When I was seeking election the first time, my Babs talked about my friend Mike Carter. Judge Carter and I were longtime friends and longtime law partners, and both of us had been blessed to be serve in public office as judicial officers. Our Mike was instrumental in getting the adult mental health court started here in Sumner County, and he and I had discussed the fact of having a court linking us together so that we are hopefully going to avoid having some of the later problems as people move from the juvenile system out of into the adult criminal court system. Mike was instrumental in starting the General Sessions health court, and he told me, he says, this sounds like something that we ought to look at doing here in Sumner County as well. And I thought it was a good idea. Um, and he and I talked about it more, and I said, Mike, I said, I think we're it. I think we would, if we're successful, I think that we would be the only operating juvenile mental health court in the state. Um, and so I'd have to say that the genesis, the idea, came from a conversation that I had with him, and I was certainly blessed when I took office to get this underway. We got paused because of the COVID pandemic, but we hit it hard coming out of the blocks, and then we took a break and reevaluated again. And as soon as we were able to, we hit it hard again to get it working. So we're very, very proud that we are leading this sort of charge. And I've been very flattered to be contacted by several other of the juvenile court judges in the state asking for information and asking on how we sort of got started. And I will also give a lot of credit to the juvenile mental health court in Denton, Texas, who has sort of helped us on the front end considerably. Uh, they allowed us to have copies of things and to observe them in action and to see what a real juvenile mental health court that already had a lot of success could look like. And we modeled a lot of what we do off of them, and we modeled a lot of how we do things off of um, Judge Carter's mental health court as well. It was something, why reinvent the wheel? Um, and so with that in mind, it's been a very cornerstone thing of my position since I took office in 2018, and I'm exceptionally proud of it and all the hard work, because it wasn't just me who really got it going. It was a lot of people. I'm a lawyer who's blessed to be a judge, um, and I saw an opportunity here, and we took that because I think it's something that can help kids and can help families, and we've seen it work. So I think that the more that we do this, the better it's going to be. And I also believe that it's just the first step in, frankly, a larger, more involved conversation that we can have about juvenile mental health issues. Because we treat it as somewhat of a probation kind of program, but it's much more than that. But I think it is step one in a much larger initiative that I think we can get going. All right. I've run out of juice for a minute, so Alan, I'm gonna let you
No, it sounds
get it
good.
in.
With our humble beginnings and Judge Howard's foresight and his desire to make this possible, we started meeting in 2019 before COVID hit us at the beginning of uh, 2020 really hard. Having meetings with community partners, both with mental health providers, other members of the community, like Babs here, with her insight, with law enforcement agencies, with CASA, with county commissioners, with everyone we could get our hands on really to come and share their ideas of how could we make a juvenile mental health court successful. As a court, we're good at court things, but we, under Judge Howard's direction, we knew that this would be something bigger than just a court. So we looked for opportunities and information about how do we address mental health issues broadly for youth and families in Sumner County. So part of our meetings, we use something called the sequential intercept model to address every point that youth would come in contact with law enforcement, come in contact with the court, and even the schools to try and address where are we having issues with mental health interacting with behavior in our county. And we began those meetings. We had multiple meetings before the pandemic hit. We had actually in March we were preparing the next month to go to Denton, Texas, to sit and be able to observe in person how their mental health courts operated, talk with them face to face about all that they did and how we could do our best to implement our juvenile health court in Tennessee. But sadly, we were unable to do that. But thankfully, we were able to observe via Zoom and get some great insight from their director, their case managers, and also their probation officer on the different roles and how juvenile mental health issues were treated in a court setting with probation and balancing that with treatment and incentives and sanctions. So through all of that, we came up with kind of some basic criteria that we have for our court specifically. We're pretty wide open now. I think we're a little more restrictive at the beginning, but I think we're seeing that we can do more good and have a broader mission than we initially wanted to. And we hope to get there, but I think we've gotten there a little bit faster with just how our court is running now post COVID. Um, Initially, our goal was to avoid two things. One, transfer to the adult system or transfer to the adult court from juvenile court. And number two, avoid where a child comes into the custody of the Department of Children's Services and is removed from the home because of their delinquent behavior. Those were our two main goals. If we could avoid that and keep children in the home, have adequate services there to help mitigate delinquent unruly behavior and to address mostly the family unit as a whole, because we understood that mental health issues as they arise, whether that be a diagnosis of um, autism plus, if it could be oppositional defiant behavior, where we see a lot of assaults and domestic violence. We have severe depression, we have severe anxiety, all of these things, trying to figure out how do we work with a child, but also everybody else in that home that touches that child. So one thing that sets our juvenile mental health court apart from anything else is we're not only servicing a child, we're servicing parents and siblings and everyone that is attached to this family unit and trying to figure out our best way to open up good lines of communication to overcome the stigma of mental health uh, concerns and diagnoses in our community as well, and to give a support to family members who are at this point, by the time that we get them, are at the end of their rope on how can they handle this child that is out of control. So, in developing our criteria, we basically had one restriction: we weren't going to take any sex cases, so anything dealing with rape or anything like that, sexual touching as well, just to focus on other things that we could handle better, which we were more equipped to do. Um, so we have a minimum IQ score of 70 just because of competency issues at court to make sure that an individual knows exactly what the disposition of their cases or what is going on. Usually, we look at a child diagnosed with ADHD or autism. They usually have to have a diagnosis beyond that to be a candidate. It is that plus something else. Um, but other than that, we have kind of opened things up to be as wide open as possible and cast a wide net to see how we can better serve a larger population in our community. Just for y'all's information, we've had one successful candidate already graduate the program. We started in October of last year. That was our first candidate. She was wonderful and worked very hard. We had wonderful opportunities in court to discuss treatment, medication, interpersonal relationship between the child and her custodian, and deal with a lot of those issues that brought brought all of the delinquent behavior to the surface. We found that communication was one of the biggest catalysts, and the lack thereof causing why this child was not able to stay out of juvenile court. Um, so Judge Howard got very creative in a lot of the dispositions or a lot of the challenges and invitations we gave to our first candidate and her guardian. Um, it was sometimes was as simple as doing the dishes or cleaning your room, being able to have open discussions between one another about when there's a conflict that arises, or we invited and asked that both individuals they sit down and have dinner together every week. And just to see how their relationship changed to open up where we could finally address more issues that were going on and really see how the medication was affecting our candidate and how it was affecting her sleep patterns and helping change just her entire life as a whole. And we have a team made up of Judge Howard, myself, Tammy Kellogg, who is Judge's judicial assistant, Jared Rickard at the juvenile court, who is the probation officer who's assigned to the Sky program. And we have a broad team that votes on applicants and also does a staffing, which we have every 2 weeks. So we have court twice a month and a staffing twice a month where the child and their guardian have to appear in court. We have that. It's after school and closer to when business closes for most individuals. So we start that around 4:30, and that will run as long as we need to, depending on how many candidates we have at a time. We do a staffing at 3:30, 3 o'clock, actually 3 o'clock to 4, where we meet with our team members with representatives from CASA, from the school board, from law enforcement, from the district attorney's office, from our private local bar, from mental health professionals who are involved with each child's case. We get a report from them on how services have been going in the interim from week to week. What coping skills are they working on, or has there been a medication shift that we need to look at? Jared Rickard also gives a report usually on behavior. He goes and does in-person visits on a weekly basis with each uh, uh, participant in the program. He meets with them at school. He goes over with how they're doing in their schoolwork. We look at their IEP. We look at their 504 plan. We do our best to make sure they are getting all the services necessary to help them be successful in their education and their future endeavors. So there's contact with each family almost on a daily basis, if not at least a weekly basis through our probation department. And then we see them every other week. And the opportunities that we have during court, we follow up on what challenges or invitations that we've given. We follow up, we've given assignments to examine what medications are you taking? Why are you taking them? What is your dosage? To help them understand better how can they take charge of their own medication management in a better way. They have a better understanding of what's going on, how their medications affect their body, and how they can prepare to deal with those medications when maybe they have some adverse effects like difficulty sleeping and things like that. How do we monitor dosages to get those correct? We have lots of opportunities for really getting involved in these children's lives. I wish, in my heart of hearts, I wish we could treat every case like a Sky case from our Summer County Youth Empowerment Program, where we take the time, where we can delve deeply into every facet of a child's life, where we can assist them and let them know that we love them, number one. We want them to succeed and we believe in them. So we focus on compassion. That is one of the biggest things that we do, and let them know that we're on their team. In addition to having a successful applicant, we've also had an unsuccessful applicant who unfortunately was placed in the Department of Children's Services because of her behavior. Um, there was a lot of issues with things that continued going on in the home. There were a lot of interventions that we had to put in place trying to address more violent behavior. And we worked and we worked and we worked, but we felt like we were not getting there no matter what we did. Um, and that was hard for us as a team to try and see that whatever opportunities we had available, whatever incentives we gave, we unfortunately were forced to give sanction after sanction after sanction and saw noncompliance with program requirements. Doing our best to have heartfelt conversations to open up deep wounds that existed in this family's life, where there was lots of mistrust between child and parent, and lots of avoidance of trying to address mental health issues, period. A difficulty in therapeutic services where we were so close to having breakthroughs, but then another incident would occur at school or at home where charges could be brought. And from having a wonderful participant who was able to meet every goal, achieve everything, to see the change in the relationship between that parent and that guardian, then to see the exact opposite back to back was helpful for us. Since these were both our first group of participants, we saw the best of things and we saw the worst of things, and how we needed to address that moving forward. We currently have
So
two participants in the. Oh, was there a
I was about
question?
to say,
Oh.
I think that one thing as well is about what parental buy-in looks like.
Mhm.
In the first case that Alan told you about, where we have a child who was living with her guardian, in this case, her grandmother, the buy-in was there early. And we weren't sure. We weren't sure how that was going to go at first. But they jumped in both feet and responded well. And we challenged the child and we challenged the grandmother, and they both the buy-in there um, was important, and that was certainly a learning possibility, because when you lay it against the second case that Alan was talking about, where the buy-in was not, and lots of excuses were made, and every time that we would try to address something, there was always sort of a, well, I mean, it's none of me, from the mother, and trying to encourage her to stand fast in many of these things, just it just simply failed, and mom wound up covering for a lot, and we found that there was some. We got to the point where, I mean, there was just, I think, a lot of mutual distrust. Although I think Alan indicated we did pretty much everything we could at sanction versus sanction, until finally we had yet like our third complete blow up. And when I'm talking about blow up, I'm talking about full on fight in the street. And we wound up having to bring the child into custody because of it, and because the probation officer says I can't continue to work here because they're not buying in, they're not wanting to do this, um, and so I think Alan's right. I mean, we saw in two cases some very interesting things to make every other case coming down the pipe, I think, a worthwhile endeavor to how things could go. So
Did one of you talk for a moment about what the incentive is for the child or the family? Why would they
Mhm.
want to go, invest in this? I mean, obviously there's a lot of benefits that they get out of it, but they also have to show up for a lot. They have to put a lot into it. So can you talk about that?
Sure. One of the great benefits of this is we treat this under juvenile law as a judicial diversion. What that means is that the child is under supervision for a certain period of time by the court. In this case, we have judicial diversion and supervised probation. We use both under statute to assist this child. But what that allows for is that if the child successfully completes the program, they have an opportunity to have the charges that brought them before us dismissed. And then after that dismissal, they can get those charges expunged. which is a great benefit for the family to hopefully start off on a better foot and to have a clean slate. That's just from the legal perspective an incentive that we have. And also, it's kind of the incentive of, do you want to go to custody, or are we looking at a transfer? So we're at the end of usually a family's rope and a child's journey through the juvenile court process. We've usually had these youth, and both of the participants that we've talked about had multiple incidents that brought them before Judge Howard. Lots of domestic violence, lots of unruly behavior. I mean, multiple charges, multiple incidents with law enforcement. Bringing them into the program was at kind of the end of their time in juvenile court before more drastic measures had to take place. So that is an incentive to keep them from going into custody and to keep them from being transferred as well. So practically, those are some of the great benefits to assist. And then the other things, the value added on what services we can provide and the work we do with the families is also something else, because there is a heavy time commitment and a lot that the families have to give to participate. But we promise them that we will give just as much as they do, if not more, to help them be successful.
And I think we try to make it a situation when they come and meet with us, because they meet with me,
Mhm.
and they meet with Alan and with our team. In the it becomes a running conversation, and you get to know these kids and their families better, and they see you as judge, because I'm not there and I don't have the robe on, and I'm not on the bench, and I'm not doing anything like that. I'm sitting down with them in a conversation, and we're able to have a conversation and to talk about what's going on. So as Alan mentioned about the medication, when I look at the kid and they go, I want you to know why you're taking this. I mean, yeah, the doctor can prescribe it. We can all tell you, yeah, we think this is a great idea for you to take it, but why are you taking it? What does this do for you? Um, it's able to have and create, again, I go back to create that buy-in, because hopefully they see me as somebody other than sort of the great frowning face of juvenile court, who's only interested in them, stay out of trouble now. That they're much more interested in the fact of, hey, maybe Judge Howard, you know, I mean, maybe he does, really care about what's going on with me, and he seems to be very interested in what's going on with me, and that's right. Alan's correct. I wish that we had the time to do multiple cases, every case this way, but just the sad realities is we don't. But the kids that we're seeing come through Sky, I think that we're prepared to give it everything we've got, to give them a hand, um, and all they've got to do is take it. And we've been blessed. Even the one that failed, it there were moments when it was working, but there was just a lot of things that was not willing to be discussed. And I'm not talking about the specifically discussed with me, but in therapy, there were this kid was not to the point where she was willing to discuss what was going on, and which is sad, because she's a neat kid, and she certainly deserved better.
I have gotten one question. It was asked in private, but it says, are there opportunities available to volunteer or provide advisement for this program? I'm deeply invested in this. I've got significant experience with this population. If people want to get involved or want, their local community to launch something like this, what are the next steps, and how can people get involved in something like this?
Um, I guess to get involved with us, if you're in the Sumner County area, or just please reach out to either Alan or to my assistant, and we can. The advisory board itself is sort of an amorphous creation, which um, ebbs and flows as people are able to attend the meetings. If you're looking for something in your own community, I would encourage you to contact your local juvenile court. I mean, tell the judges are not going to know everything that's needed sometimes, because we've all got our own dockets and we've got hundreds of cases. And I and Magistrate Begley are blessed in the kinds of cases that we have, but I spend much of my time doing child abuse cases. Um, so um, having a knowledge about what is needed is a constant thing that the court needs to be aware of. Um, just simply because it's juvenile court, I would not assume that every juvenile court judge is switched on to everything that may be needed, and they may not believe that they can do it in their county. It's a tough thing to talk about children's mental health, and to try to break, generational and systemic problems. But reaching out to the juvenile court and saying, "Hey, is this something that can be done?" And then it's just a matter of starting, like Babs knows, starting rounding people up to have the sit down together and to have a conversation and go, "What can we do? What does this look like for us?" Um,
And if you're
so
in
that's
Williamson County, I've already tapped Judge Guffey and told her that I expect her to follow in Judge Howard's footsteps and launch one. I've already put her on notice. We've got some questions that said, is there something like this in Memphis? There's not anything established that we know of in Memphis yet, but that doesn't mean there can't be. We have seen it, be built from the ground up here, and so we know it can be done. Another question is there research on results of someone going through mental health court, either youth or adult, compared to a control group or an individual that goes through a typical court process? So can you talk about if there's any research around that?
Alan.
Research wise, most of it is not focused specifically on mental health courts. We have research for specialty courts for the adults, specifically usually related to drug treatment, and specialized courts that have the same type of model that we have. I know our own Sumner County Recovery Court has a similar model to us. I know it's focused more on substance abuse issues, but a lot of the mental health issues overlap, where they've been able to see reductions up to, I think it's like a 40% reduction in recidivism rates just for people who go through these type of programs that have lots of hands-on accountability, et cetera. For mental health court, we don't have the same statistics here in Sumner County for the adults. It basically has been restarted this past year. So right now they're going through a data collection process, and I'm keeping my hand on that specifically, see what the success is there. For juvenile mental health specifically, there's not a lot on juvenile mental health courts, period. Denton, Texas told us that, from their own court, they've seen success where they've been able to see that the majority of their participants, because they have usually 10 to 15 at a time, they stop this train usually of recidivism, where these kids are coming in every other month or so on because of episodes. They're able to reduce that, but it's not as quantitative as we would like. Our hope is that since we don't have anything here in Tennessee specifically to model, that we are able to look at that and see from our own data collection what we can do. Now, there's a lot of information more about judicial diversions and things like that, and so that's kind of what we're bringing into our program. How can we handle this more informally and avoid formal court processes? We know that any child's involvement in the juvenile justice system, period, exponentially increases their likelihood of further recidivism and also being involved later on in life in the adult court system. That's why through the Juvenile Justice Reform Act, there's been such a great push towards more informal means or more diversion-based programming for youth and families. That's why we put juvenile mental health court under our diversions. We see this as this needs to be less formal. Judge is not on the bench. We're not in robes. We're having conversations. Now, again, we're kind of heightened because we're treating this more for more severe cases. But I think this ties, especially when we're looking at research, to our goals in the future of what we're wanting to do and expand how we service mental health issues broadly and have more interventions for first-time juvenile offenders. That's where I know more research is, because if we can have interventions at that point, the likelihood of recidivism goes down up to 60%. It goes up to 70%. It goes so much higher because we're able to get involved at the front end as opposed to the back end. But again, as a court, we knew what to do as a court. We're had to look at interventions at the school level through our school resource officers, through community organizations that have interactions with youth who may have mental health concerns or even disabilities. How do we have early interventions where we can get services in? That is the next step for us. And that's kind of what we had discussed. I know Babs was there when we were looking at the sequential intercept model. where do we look at every point of contact, and how do we get to the point where we don't even see them in juvenile court at all? That's where we want to get to. We just knew that we could start a court faster, and that was what we could do because we knew what we had and knew how to deal with it. And we see the benefits there of being able to handle some of the more severe cases, but hopefully work ourselves backwards to where there is more substantial research on early interventions for these youth and families.
I know when we were doing the research on the advisory committee, we got data out of Denton. I was thinking it was Austin, but it's Denton. And there were a surprising number of kiddos in their program who had autism, in addition to
Mhm.
some other mental health thing. It was a very
It's
surprisingly high number. I know you guys haven't seen that yet here because you've had to be, slow roll it and because of COVID. But one of the questions we just got was, do you all do additional evaluations outside of the schools to assess abilities such as communication, sensory needs, et cetera? So you can talk about the partnerships that you've established and how you're assessing those things.
So one of our primary partners right now is Volunteer Behavioral Health here in Sumner County. What we do, and I'll just give an overview of how we get records as we prep to see if a participant could go through the Sky program. Usually, Tammy Kellogg and myself, we will meet with a family if a attorney is wanting to refer them to the Sky program. As we meet with them, we get releases of information signed for any mental health provider or any interaction they have outside of just their regular pediatrician, where we can get every record and school record for these individuals, see if they have an IEP, a 504 plan, what diagnosis they have. We send all of that information once we get it to Volunteer Behavioral Health, and we have an initial assessment with all of that information given. We have an individual, his name is Tim Searcy, just meet with the family basically for an intake where we go over all of that information from the family, see if there's anything that we missed. And a lot of times that's where we'll get, if there is an autism diagnosis, we will get that information at that point. What we do then is if we accept that individual and vote that individual will be a part of the program, we take all of that information and then we start going to our community partners uh, with trying to figure out what the best services would be for the family. Since we haven't had autism yet as something to deal with, that's not something we've had to evaluate which partners would be best to help with that type of programming. We do have connections with Tennessee Voices, Mental Health Co-op, Volunteer Behavioral Health. Through our Safe Baby Court program, we have even more resources now at our fingertips because of how many connections we've made there. I know we've talked with individuals from Autism Tennessee. We have attorneys that specialize in learning disabilities as well. One of our good friends who helps us very often, her name is Blair Dunnigan, who specializes in those types of issues on the legal side and has a lot of resources for us as well. So what we have done is create a blanket of resources that we can tap. So we know that if autism becomes one of those things we need to address, we have a list of individuals that we will reach out to and organizations where we say, what can we do based on insurance, availability, and everything else that we're trying to do that doesn't conflict with already current treatments that the child is going through. We don't want to disrupt anything. We just want to add to. So that's kind of where we are with looking at autism specifically. Just because we haven't had a case with it yet, we haven't had to go down that road. From observing Denton, Texas, we know and are very cognizant that will be something we have to deal with in the future.
Okay, another question we got. Well, starts with a statement. This is a great asset for Tennessee. So they're excited. Are participants given information or training on ACEs as part of their involvement in the mental health court? I know we talked about ACEs recently, Alan. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. So with adverse childhood experiences, we are required to go, well, as a court, if we adjudicate anybody delinquent or delinquent specifically, we have to do a CANS assessment, whether that's on a front end, and that's a child's need and risks assessment to see where they fall and what ACEs have occurred, what traumatic experience, potential loss of parent, abuse, etc. We do that assessment on the front end with each of these families, and all of our programming is tied to that evaluation. So if we're looking at dealing with anything from the loss of a parent onward, we have that information on the front end because we, as a court, we're required to do that. Therefore, we're always looking at ACEs and how they impact what we do and do our best to have a trauma informed approach to dealing with these individuals. And that's why what I love about Sky is our more informal approach. We're not bound by procedure and the way things go in a regular court setting. We're able to use communication as a way to help tease out some of these issues and be able to address it not only in our we'll say court setting, but also it helps us give information when we have our staffings to service providers saying, this is something that we need to make sure is addressed. This child is talking about physical abuse that occurred at some point early on in their lives, and this is tied to the trauma that's brought them to this behavior. That's why that may be a reason they're acting out. We need to address it. So we'll make sure that the mental health provider is aware of that so that they can begin to look at specific services and therapeutic services that are dialed in specifically for those issues. And that's just an example, but that's kind of how we treat it. We always have our Kansas assessment, that evaluation that plugs us into just some basic ideas of what ACEs may be in that child's life. Now, we hope that those are accurate. We have a lot of times that sometimes things are not reported on those that come up later in our discussions. That's what we've seen a lot with just the two candidates that we had go through. They would report one thing on a Kansas assessment as it was administered, but we would have more information start coming out as we build that rapport with the families. So we do our best to be very cognizant of any ACEs that our participants and their parents or guardians have, because we don't have we do have some information on parents, obviously, through the Kansas assessments that we get, but a lot of times we don't have a lot of information from them, and that comes out a lot of times through our programming that is volunteered to us. So we do our best to address all of those things as they do come up.
Okay, another question we got, and this is one we always get, is
Mhm.
how's it funded? Where's the money coming from?
Judge, you
What
want to
money?
cover this one?
Yeah, what money? This was there's no money here. This was all us. Um, um,
Which has
we
been a
had the
struggle. I'll give you that.
yeah, we had the probation officer who was interested in doing it. So although he's a probation supervisor for our probation team and carries a caseload, he wanted to do this, so he is um, taking that. You're looking. Alan is and Tammy are our general directors right now. We're interested in hiring a director, but we're trying to get funding for that. But there is no money. Uh, this is all because we wanted to do it and willed it into being. So, but
It
now
was a
if
passion
anybody knows
project.
of any money out there
Yeah.
that wants to write a check, for example, and everybody knows, I'll be very blunt. I want some funding, um, but because I want us to be able to grow, and I want us to be able to do what we need to do to help kids. And but yeah, right out of the blocks, there was $0 and 0 cents.
So with that, I will just think I think that speaks to the character of the individuals that we have working at Sumner County Juvenile Court. We all understood Judge's vision, and we wanted to make it happen because we knew that this was the best way we could handle these issues. Now, we have been seeking funding since our inception. We have gone to our legislators. We've looked for grant funding. I saw someone talk about the Department of Mental Health. We are in
Yeah.
communications with the Department of Mental Health specifically on other grants as well related to Safe Baby Court and also our current program with the Sky program. We are looking at funding hopefully by the end of the year. It is not as much as we had hoped for, but it is hopefully getting us into an area where we can hopefully hire a Sky coordinator. That is our biggest thing that we want because all of our staff are taxed with all the cases we have to deal with and all of our responsibilities. I know Tammy and I do our best, but we know that things fall through the cracks because we're having to cover so many different things all the time. So our biggest goal right now is to hire a Sky coordinator who has a clinical background. We're looking at someone who hopefully has at least an LCSW. That way we can bring some of our intakes and our assessments in-house. That is one of the biggest things that we want to do to be able to provide services in such a better way where we have some control over that outside of insurance and everything else. We want to be able to have groups that are coordinated by somebody with a clinical background where we can have better discussions with both parents and children, parents and youth, to be able to go over coping skills, to be able to give more education on medications, do that in a group setting as opposed to just giving it as an assignment. Have this where we can have more standardized programming to help our youth move through each phase of what we have. So
And I think part of that also is to help the individual parents or guardians, or because one of the things we saw in Denton was that it was a very all inclusive. The kids did things and the parents did things, and it's I think again strengthening that family bond, and it strengthens the sort of team mentality that I think is necessary for this to work. And I'm not talking about just Sky. I'm talking about as a family itself. They everybody has to. I know I keep going back to it to buy in, but everybody's got to buy in, and um, we want to be able to give more than we have. Um, and that's one thing Tammy and I are having the conversation one day. She's like, I just don't feel like sometimes we've done enough. And I'm like, yeah, I agree. We've only done, I think we've only sort of scraped the beginnings of where we can go. But right now, not having somebody on staff that we can devote specifically to this gives us um, some limitations. I mean, Alan has other things that he has to do. I have things that I have to do. Tammy has things that she has to do that are far beyond just what Sky is. And I'd love to be able to devote a specific person to do this, to be able to help all the way across the board.
So we have a couple of other questions that have come in, but is there anything else you guys wanted to share about the program that we haven't covered yet?
I think for me, I think it's just the future is bright. I think we have a lot of opportunities for types of courts like these, whether it's a mental health court or a recovery court for youth, something that encapsulates the entire family unit instead of just looking at the child and their behavior. The only way that we can truly affect change is being able to address what environment exists for these kids and find a way for them to be able to learn how to communicate better. Because sometimes, I mean, there is personal accountability here. That is a big part of what we do. We're not going to allow a child to get away with just acting out because we want them to understand it. We want them to face appropriate consequences for that, but we want them to learn and to grow. I mean, Judge Howard, my favorite saying, he always says this is juvenile court is a court of second chances. That's the whole purpose of what we do. We focus on rehabilitation and education. And we want to give every child an opportunity to do that successfully. And I think through Sky, even our safe baby court programs, courts like these that are based in compassion and accountability and treatment, that's where we can make the most change. I think a lot of my religious beliefs are tied up in all of this because of the love we have for our brothers and sisters that we see who are suffering, who children who are growing up in environments that they didn't choose to be in, but it has negatively impacted their growth and their opportunity for success. We see generational mental health issues. We see generational um, delinquent behavior or unruly behavior. I mean, Judge can name names and families that we've seen, the grandparents, the parents, the children, and the grandchildren, all either at one time, at the same time, or all at varied times coming through our court.
Yeah,
How do
they
we
were
still
either on probation to me when I was a probation officer. I
right?
represented them as a lawyer. I've sat in judgment of them as a judge. So I mean, you see the same kinds of folks, and Alan's right. I mean, you want to break that cycle. You want to break it and make it better. And I think Alan's s- statement about all of this is entirely more eloquent than anything that I could come up with. Um, but watching it work, when it works, I mean, even on the times when on the failure, but there were moments when it worked. And to see the kid that we did who blossomed in a way that I would have never anticipated, never would have anticipated that she did as great as she did, and to be able to, not just me, all of us attended her graduation from high school. We were there because it was important, and being able to be able to do that, be able to see her go from not being getting an education to just hammering it out of the park, to be able to get her driver's license, to be able to see her have a relationship with her grandmother that had not been in existence probably since she was 9, 10, to watch this thing develop. When it works, and it is absolutely amazing.
We had another comment come in, and I know we talked about communication and trauma being two of the biggest factors that you guys have seen in your first couple of cases. This says, if you are concerned with communication, a speech language pathologist could do a functional communication assessment, which is not something a school-based SLP does. The goals and the outcomes are different and could help. So if that's something you guys wanted to consider adding to your
Cool.
bag of tricks, that could be potential for you.
Duly noted. I think that's something
Yeah,
that we should definitely look into. So I've noted that, and we'll make sure that that is on my list of things when I get back to the office.
Okay, and then Janet Shaw said, "Do you have a federally qualified health center in your county? Could they help connect?" I wonder if this is probably about the funding part, and that's something we could look into as well potentially.
okay.
Yeah. Does anybody else have? Oh, this says, "I'm an SLP. My specialty area is adolescents with mental health and trauma. In case you want to reach out,
Sure. Dr.
Okay,
Lawrence, thank
Dr.
you.
Lawrence, I
take,
see that
take her name down."
you were noted.
Does
Yeah.
anybody else have any questions for? Oh, Joan said, SAMHSA and the National Council for Mental Well-being may have funding opportunities for this. So, Alan, are you taking notes?
He's
That's
a
something that
note
I'm
taker.
taking
I'm
notes.
sure he's got it down. They'll probably rather hear from Alan than my more direct, give me money to approach. So,
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. I will see if any more questions roll in the next couple of minutes. Yeah, this has been a labor of love getting this off the ground, and you guys have done wonderful with it. Janet said this is super, and then Dr. Lawrence said this is awesome. So,
well, I appreciate everybody. I mean, I know that this is a pretty usual thing, but it's not a usual thing for Alan or I to do. I'm always flattered to be asked to do anything that anybody has any concern or degree of interest in anything I have to say. Um, but this is important, and I believe in helping kids. Um, and we have an opportunity here, and I think that we as a state we have we have an opportunity, and I am going to be very proud always of the fact that we were able to get this going, and I would love to see Tennessee really this initiative take off. I've been contacted by some other judges about starting it. We've been very, I'll go and tell you, we've been very protective right now because we want to make sure that how it's working before we just sort of hand over the keys of the car and go here, take off. We wanted to make sure that this was going to be doable and under Tennessee law and see what it was going to look like. Because the last thing I want to do is contact one of my fellow judges and they go, "Yeah, this isn't going the way you said it was going to go, David." Um, and while there's no guarantee, there's just a lot of work on the front end before you see anything even vaguely looking like fruition on the back end. And I know that Bab sat at that table many times,
yep,
just like I did, going, "I don't know when we're going to get going," but all the while you have been going.
yep.
Um, so
So someone commented, "Can counties interested in starting a similar program contact you? Is there a point of contact that you guys would be willing to share?"
sure,
Okay.
You want me to
Um,
just give him my email address, Judge?
yeah, that's fine.
will you just drop it in the chat, Alan?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I would tell go with Alan. Sadly, my assistant Tammy is going to be leaving me next month, so I have to. We're going to be a one person down on our team. So right now, Alan and I are probably going to be your best bet. You'll probably get a quicker response from Alan than from me. Uh, I know there's another judge out there I already owe like multiple phone calls to, and I do apologize if you're watching. Uh,
Well, we have run up against time. I want to thank you guys so much for being here. I want to thank everybody for coming to the Clinical Consultation Network, and I hope you'll join us next week. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Babs. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank y'all.